for it to kick in. We'll get that lovely live streaming has started.
Streaming is on.
Okay, folks, sorry about that. We're back with the rest of the interview, as it were. You were saying, Patrick?
Actually, I think I lost my train of thought. I was just saying, the books in the Murphy's Law universe that have been started, and I have plotted out the next 1 to 2 Hex books. Not necessarily the next Terrible book, but the book after that. I have plotted with the stuff that has to come before. I have the next 2 or 3 Star Tenders books plotted out, and another 3 or 4 novels in the Murphy's universe, and that doesn't count. I'm finishing up the 2nd Bikini Jones book. I've started the 3rd Bikini Jones book for the series I read as Patrick T. Phibbs. One of them is called The Undead Kid Diaries, where we have a kid named Morty Graves who gets bit during the zombie apocalypse and turns into a zombie. But kids, unlike adults go all Walking Dead, but kids keep their minds as long as they eat brains. And they don't have to be human brains, which is fortunate. And they come up with a vaccine. And when I wrote this, it came out 2019. Who knew vaccines would be so controversial? The vaccines stop people who get bit from turning into a zombie. Doesn't do anything for the people who have been bit. So they managed to stop the zombie apocalypse and try and get back to normal. So the 2nd book is called It's My Party and I'll Die If I Want To. The artwork for that is being worked on now. And I have the 2nd book in the Baby Bear Mysteries. It's about Babe Bear, not Baby Bear. He hates when people call him that. And he was quoted in the newspaper and they spelled his name wrong. He catches the burglar Goldilocks when she breaks into his house. And so now people think he can solve mysteries. So he sets up a detective agency in his treehouse with his next door neighbor Rapunzel and his best friend, Not So Bad Wolf. You may have heard of his dad, Big Bad Wolf. He's in jail right now. He was because of this scam where he knocked down these 3 pigs' houses for the insurance money. So, and their first case is they get hired by the Little Mermaid to get her voice back from a sea witch. Oh, he's actually a lake witch. It's explained. And she flies around town on a jet ski instead of a broom because she didn't get asked to the prom, but the prom gets canceled because this one student named Humpty Dumpty was hanging prom decorations and he fell and he's in the hospital in a coma. And they didn't think it was right to have the prom. So she, doesn't think that should happen. So, they go and they try and help her out. And in the 2nd book, they're hired by the witch from Hansel and Gretel. She has this great new scheme to make a lot of money. She's a pastry witch, so she can create frosting, because witches have very specific powers in this universe. So she's building houses out of cookies and whatnot that people, for a lot of money, you can buy the house and have your party there and people can eat the house. But the Muffin Man is her ex-fiance and he's doing some bad things, and Hansel and Gretel are involved and they have to, figure out how to save the day. So those 2 books, they're done, just waiting for that. But like I said, just with everything that started, I have a very new twist, I hope, on a fairy tale set in Prohibition times, which is largely done. I have another one where I mix. It's definitely mixing 2 genres together in a way that it's a YA that if I say the title, it will give away the mix, and I want the book done before I mention the title.
Fair enough.
So like I said, with all this, there's a lot of different projects I'm working on, and it,
when do you get time to sleep, man?
I do not sleep because when I work, I tend to work. Oh, and John is probably thinking right now, I have to finish up the 2nd book in the Jack Gardner mysteries, because I started it, then he did it, and he gave it back to me, and I've had it for way too long. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer that book will be done as well. But when I'm in the zone, I can get, 10,000 words done in a weekend. I can get I've gotten like 50, 60,000 words done in 4 weeks when I'm in the right zone. So I go really intently, and then I back off a little bit. I know there's people who, well, you have to write every day 500 words or 1,000 words, and that's great for some people. And there's times I do that, but there's a lot of times I don't. But like I said, I tend to go in sprints and do enough sprints, and the distance adds up after a while.
Yeah,
So
you get it. You get the job done is the main thing.
yeah, I mean, I've got 50 books out, but I also
Yeah.
have probably 12 books started. I just need to. Well, what happens is I start some because it's fun. I don't have a deadline on anything, and then deadlines come up, so I have to put the project aside and work on the book that has a deadline. And right now, I'm quite a few words into a YA that I won't give away too much of this, but my daughter is graduating from high school. She has been in the marching band for her time in high school, and means I've been to a lot of football games. And somewhere along the beginning, the Bye Bye American Pie song was playing in my head. You know, when we tried to take the field, the marching band refused to yield. And I noticed, you know, they have the color guard, which my daughter has done winter guard. And you have kids with sabers and rifles and flag. I'm like, why are we arming children? I mean, they're not actual weapons, but what if they were? Why would we be arming children on a football field? And I have 30 or 40,000 words on that. And that was one I was doing for fun. And then deadlines came up, and I had to put that aside. But I'm really happy with how it's turned out so far. So
good.
It's a matter of, you know, getting the deadlines done and then going back to the other things, or easing the projects I already have started into a deadline somewhere.
See, I can't talk. I've still got the one book I'm trying to do the research for that I'm 6 months into, and there's probably at least another year of before I even start writing. And the short story, I came up with the idea of for 2 years ago now that I've never been able to figure out how to start, which is a pity because I like the idea.
Well, a lot of times when I start a short story, my first page or two I end up throwing out because it's just me kind of doing an info dump about what's going on. If it's a new character or a new universe that I don't know what's going on, yet I'll just kind of go and describe, and then somewhere on page 2 or 3, the story actually starts. But it's just a way for me to get all the thoughts organized. And then, like I said, I take the first 2 pages out, and then I have a story, or I have to start with a story.
Not sure that works here, but that's a good idea. I have the idea, and it's a friend of mine does a lot of do a twist on a classic fairy tale concepts, which inspired me for the idea of probably my favorite Brothers Grimm story is Godfather Death. Okay. Do you know the story?
Not off the top of my head, I don't. Although it sounds pretty good.
To give the idea without going into the entire story, basically this guy needs a godfather for his kid, decides, I'm going to go out to the crossroads and wait, and anyone who comes by, I'll ask. God shows up, and the guy won't take him as the godfather because, you know, good men die young and wicked men are very rich, and God's not fair. God leaves. Satan shows up, and Satan can't be the godfather, he's Satan. And then finally, in the darkest part of the night, Death himself shows up. And because Death is always fair, because he takes everyone in their time, regardless of money or status or goodness or wickedness, he accepts Death as the godfather of his kid. And the kid goes on, and there's a whole story there, but it's like, so what happens when the guy dies and God goes, so you don't want me to be the godfather of your son? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
That could be fun. So it'd be more, the story would start when he dies.
Yeah.
And then hell, when you'd almost get Will the Wisp story where, too bad for heaven, but too good for hell.
Sort
So
of, though. I have this idea that at the end, God lets him in anyway because God's just messing with him a little. But if you're an immortal, all powerful being, you get bored.
that would make sense. So, and I'm already God. I'm in the name, so I'm covered.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that has a lot of possibilities. I like it. So
Thank you.
I was gonna say I don't know how much longer we have. I could talk a little bit more about. I'm very happy with the Bikini Jones universe. It looks a little bizarre because of the pinup style of the cover. And actually, Dan Horn had done the picture, and we were talking, and I'm like, well, why in fantasy covers, rock and roll album covers, comic books, are these women dressed scantily, like in bikinis? And why are they fighting dragons and monsters and aliens? I mean, or why are they facing off against them? I mean, wouldn't a more sensible outfit be, armor or
Yeah.
something that covers that? And I'm like, well, there'd have to be a good reason. Well, what would be a good reason, to fight monsters in a bikini? And then I came up with the idea of the curse. And that led itself to a universe where if you could have something as ridiculous as a woman who, takes off a bikini and another bikini appears, what could happen in this universe? And the answer is anything.
Yeah.
Because at various points, she's fighting mobster themed bad guys. She's mentioning that one of the princes of Atlantis is asking her out on a date. She found, the person who's running her company spent 150 years on the Flying Dutchman, but was actually born in 1803. I'm maybe misremembering the year a little bit. So basically anything that can happen, I can make work in this universe because the laws of reality are quite flexible, which is a lot of fun. And in the first book, we have her having to deal with something that vexes her worse than, fighting, ancient ones. And it's her sister. So, because she has 5 doctorates and she's a master of martial arts, and she's been trained by the Clown Ninja Monks of Newark, her real name is Mary Sue, but
Of
her name
course.
is just lean into it. And her sister is an archaeologist. She only has 2 doctorates but 3 masters, and she finds a Egyptian pyramid on the outskirts of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania,
Like you
and
do.
like you do, as often happens, and women in the town are starting to disappear, and basically we find out that aliens have been who came in ancient Egyptian times have been awoken, and they need human brains to replace part of their brains that were lobotomized. And so they're kidnapping women to do this. And of course, there's a lot of things that go along this, including an evil human helper. And she has to save the world. And we find out, and she has no superpowers other than, bikinis have to appear when she takes the bikini off. But she can control the type of bikini that appears. So at one point, they're in the pyramid and they're being shot up by laser beams and attacked by huge, giant Deathstalker scorpions, which, this happens, to do when you find a pyramid. And
Yeah. Typical Saturday.
She makes so the bikinis are mirrored. And the cups are separatable. So she gives a couple to her sister and they start redirecting the lasers to fry the scorpions. And, so she uses being able to summon bikinis, but, she can't summon a cell phone bikini or a, Colt 45 bikini or, anything like that. So there's no machinery able to be summoned, just, materials. So it's a lot of fun. Book 2 is Bikini Jones versus the Sea Monsters. And this one, she's facing off against a cult that worships the Deep Ones and is trying to summon Dagon Jr. So, but we also managed to work in shark people and a crooked commissioner of police in New York City, and the opening of a restaurant, which she gets bamboozled into investing in the first book. So, as is apt to happen.
I need to get around to reading the first book, for that matter.
So it should, like I said, it's a lot of fun. It's fun. It veers into campy without being campy, I think. But it's upbeat. It's positive. She's the type of hero that tries not to kill people. If it's between them and her, it'll be them. But because she is such a resourceful woman person, she is able to most of the time avoid killing when, kind of, like Batman or whatnot. So I think that makes it a little bit more fun that, the bad guys will often survive and have to go be imprisoned in some way. So
I just say that's a common theme with some of your stuff is that the heroes don't try to avoid killing people.
it is in a lot of cases. I've done some where it's the opposite. Particularly my novella in Murder in Montague Falls. And when people who haven't read some of my darker stuff read stuff like that, they're like, oh. But, that's another very good noir type of book there. But it's, I if I'm going to be writing a lot, I want to try and make it positive, and it's fiction. So it doesn't have to be, even though I'll complain about something like Die Hard 2, like I said earlier, that doesn't follow through. If you're consistent to the world, I can overlook, Superman being able to save everybody, when in reality, as the building's being knocked down in the fight, probably a few hundred people have died, where in, this, he or the Flash or somebody who comes in and saves everybody. I think when you have that option available, it's a good option to take. But I do have other series where things are darker and people die, and I figured,
fair enough, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I just
You're
figured.
saying particularly Murphy's Law is the not killing's a big theme.
Yeah. So when in the other books people do get killed, it's it's a little more meaningful, because the other characters like Hex and Negro and even Terrible will kill people if the situation demands it, but because they have extra normal abilities, the situation has to be pretty severe to demand it. And actually in Terrible the Unconquered, we have Terrible doing some really dark stuff in her time leading up to and becoming a soldier in Ferry. But being a soldier is a lot different than being the equivalent of a private eye. She's not a private eye, but, she functions in some ways in that subgenre.
It's hard to think of a better title for what she does, although obviously she isn't one.
Yeah, because Nemesis throughout history traditionally has three agents of, in legend or myth, three agents of vengeance, although in mine it's three agents of justice, and she will kill people, and Terrible, when working with her, will kill people. But in one of the stories in Fairy with a Gun, she wants to make sure before, and this one they don't actually kill the people, but they're making their lives, the rest of their lives, utterly horrible and unbearable. But the two people involved did some very horrible things, and it's quite justified. But she actually was willing to go undercover and put herself at risk to make sure that they actually deserved what they were going to get. And Nemesis, in some of her solo stories, has, taken people and they die in a very appropriate but bloody way. So,
yeah.
But she works as the enforcer for the Council of Thrones, and that's a higher authority than Patty Moran of Bullfinch's Pub.
And that also just makes me think of a joke I made to my fiance the other day, because we just finished watching the Hercules animated series, and Nemesis is a character in there,
Oh,
and so
I didn't realize that.
yes, specifically incorrectly as a demigod, but it's just watching it made me think of a joke. It's simply just a moment of she's the goddess of divine vengeance. So Batman, I am darkness, I am vengeance. And Nemesis going, no, I am vengeance.
No, I'm vengeance. No, I'm vengeance. I'm vengeance.
Trying to remember who voiced her, because
Was it like like I'm vengeance? Was it kind of Batman-esque voice or?
in the show, no, but in my mindset of this, I am vengeance, though I am vengeance, and yeah, it's got to be that. No, I am vengeance.
Yeah. Well, in the books, it's mentioned by Terabell, by Murphy, by some other people that you don't want to stare into Nemesis's eyes too long, because she is the daughter of a primal force of the universe, and the stuff in there you're not supposed to see if you're mortal. And even if you're not mortal, you don't want to see it.
Oh, so Linda Hamilton voices Nemesis. For those who don't recognize the name, because I didn't originally either, she's also Sarah Connor from the Terminator movies.
I was going to say, that sounds...
that was
tough woman.
The surprising thing watching the Hercules series is how many famous people guest star as various goddesses or gods or heroes. Like Artemis is Reba McEntire.
Okay, that's got to be interesting. The goddess is from South Greece.
And I want to say Dolly Parton's in it as well, but I forget as whom.
I don't know. I think Dolly Parton should, if she wants a part, she should get it. There's very few people in the world you hear as much good things about as Dolly Parton.
Yeah, good Lord, yeah, it's incredibly impressive.
I mean, and just from a fandom point of view, if I'm remembering correctly, she was one of the producers of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series, I believe. So, like, she's responsible in some way for Buffy and Angel and that whole, maybe, who knows, maybe even Firefly, which should theoretically offset the negative connotations of Mr.
Whedon. Joss Whedon, yeah.
Yeah, so if Dolly Parton's involved, that cancels it out. We can all enjoy it again because it's Dolly Parton.
Yeah. Because, well, I don't want to give any more attention to Joss Whedon. I'm good with giving it to Dolly Parton.
Absolutely. I mean, I hope I'm not remembering it wrong, but I seem to remember, like Lucille Ball, Star Trek,
Yep. Which was definitely surprising. It's like, yeah, huh, she is a large part of why we got Star Trek. Which is just cool.
But like I said, considering those around her, that somebody has the courage to say, no, this is wrong, people are people, that she gave money that helped develop the vaccine, that she's been giving books to kids for years. I mean, she supports an orphanage, I believe. She just arranged, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, like for the people who work for her at Dollywood, that she's arranging for them to get college educations for their kids. I mean, this is a good person. And, it's somebody who probably could be a billionaire a couple times over, but instead she's sharing the wealth. And I'm certain Dolly Parton is not poor.
No.
But
I looked it up. You are right. She was a producer for Buffy.
Yep. So I think Dolly Parton's involvement cancels out the other involvement, and we can all enjoy Buffy again.
Yes. I also just loved, there's a story of Dolly Parton That is, in fact, quite true. That she entered a look-alike contest, lost to a transvestite performer,
Yep.
and was absolutely tickled pink about the entire thing.
Yep. Because they did not know it was her until the end.
Yeah, which is the only right way to do that. But just like, no, she's delighted. She's more than happy to lose. She thought they looked great.
Well, I mean, and there are certain people who in that community are revered, and Dolly Parton is among them. So I mean, the fact that she embraces it, I think, is a good thing, because let's be honest, there's a lot of people in this world who just want to, spew distrust
Hatred.
and hatred, and we need more people to just realize people are people, and if it doesn't affect you, then why worry about it?
Yeah,
When
it's a whole lesson that I at least learned once upon a time, and I wonder why everybody forgot of. Sometimes the best thing to do is mind your own business. Let people be who they are.
Well, I think, and again, this is my speculation, I think sometimes we have bad days, or we have bad periods, we have bad streaks where things are going wrong and we get upset. And sometimes it's easier to take what's inside of us and just blame other people in a way, not say, oh, well, it's your fault I lost my job, not the corporation's fault because they moved it to, Timbuktu. But just you're hurting, and instead of dealing with the hurt in a way that can be constructive, you spew it onto somebody else. And I think that, is a lot of what happens, because see, now we're going into this whole metaphysical, but if you're, I know it's happened to me. Like if I'm having a bad day, my temper might be shorter. I might act or say and do something that I wouldn't normally do. And I think if you're having a bad enough time of things, you're just angry, and that anger can come out in different ways. And that doesn't excuse it, but it does explain it. And story I often tell is in my other life, I'm a physical therapist, and I was working with this one teenager at one point years ago who was very severely multiply disabled, had to be molded into his wheelchair, and only would laugh when he had a seizure. I mean, it was very severely. And his dad was not a large man, but you could tell by, he was manual labor, English was not his first language. And he would come into where I worked, and he would yell at people who were working with his son and just whatever. And one day he came in, I happened to be the one working with him, and he comes over and he starts yelling at me and screaming. And I was in a very good place that day. So I just kind of took a deep breath and I listened. And I let him go. And then, since I wasn't going back at him, he kept talking. And then he starts explaining to me that this is his son, who's named after him, which is a big deal in this culture. And he has a daughter at home who has the same medical condition, but she's not stable enough to leave the home during the day. So he's working 2 full-time jobs, and his wife stays home with the kids, with the daughter, and then that. And then when he comes home, she gets to go out and grocery shopping or something, and they don't want to put their children in a group home or anything like that. So he's working 2 jobs and doing all this. So basically, his life was just overwhelming him. He'd come in, and he can't do that at work because he'd get fired. So he came in to a place where it wasn't quite safe, but there weren't going to be overly negative consequences for him letting everything spill out. And when he's done, he because this was a guy, like tough guy, macho guy. Like after he kept saying all this, he just kind of did a quick on his eyes real quick. And then he actually apologized. I'm like, no, don't be sorry. No problem. I said, you want to come in and talk any other time? come in. He never took me up on it, but I was like that. And then someone else who worked with this person came over and said, "Oh, it was finally you." And I was like, "Have you never listened to the man? He wants to come in once a week and yell at me. If that'll make him feel better, I'll make time." I can't imagine you, and just looking at him, you wouldn't know this was going on in his life. But he was coming in and just yelling at people because he was overwhelmed by everything that life was dumping on him. So I try to remember that when someone starts venting and all this, you don't know what's going on with them. So you try, there's lines, like I said, he wasn't attacking me. He was just yelling. He was, so I think it's important that we realize that some of these people who are spewing this hatred, they're not happy with how their lives turned out. Something's gone wrong. They're blaming. They think they should have been. And so they're blaming others. And I like to think that there might be a way that they can see that people are people and that maybe they can realize they're in the wrong. And, and actually that's the theme in some of my writing. And it's not easy to do because I'll be honest, there's been times when, I would go back just as strong as someone's coming at me. That day I was in a good place. And it's easier to say than to do, but it's important to try.
I agree 100%. Just the power of that. That guy needed somebody to listen.
Yeah. I can't imagine what he was going through, So,
yeah.
And I mean, the love he had for his kids to be doing that is tremendous. So he was doing all for love of family. So,
he's not a horrible guy. He's a guy in a horrible situation.
Exactly. And, like I said, so after I realized all that, if he had ever come in and yelled at me again, I would have just been fine with it. But, other times somebody starts yelling at me, I'm not quite so fine with it. So
you're not perfect. No one expects you to be.
Yeah. So, okay. I didn't know how long you would like to continue because I think we've probably been
We're
for a little bit.
The usual hour mark, which is fine. Advantage of doing the show on my own terms is I get to decide when it starts and stops.
Well, there you go.
And this is fun.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a while.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I needed to get back to doing episodes anyway. There's the problem. I just did a really good interview with three guys who released a Dungeons and Dragons supplement, but because of various reasons I don't want to go into to protect privacy, we've got to take the one guy's face out of the whole thing. So that got taken down and will be up again soon. And then we have another video of me did a series of me reacting to clips of the paranormal in television. And it's really good, but I need Amisha to edit the clips of what I'm reacting to into the video. So
like
it makes
a split screen kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. You've seen things in your experience and, how accurate it would be and how not accurate, so.
And I think all of us have that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen things as a physical therapist, and you talked about seeing the plot holes in Die Hard as a writer. And John's talked about, his decades of experience in CSI compared to anything that does that on television or movies.
Well, it's kind of funny. CSI is my favorite show on television. In one episode, they threw one of my books at a suspect's head. In that same episode, they touched another one of my books. I have screenshots on my website because you can see it. My books were on Greg's desk on the show for like 7 years. In that 7 years, his desk was in one episode. But my books were there the whole time. I was invited to the set, and John is not a fan of CSI, and he's probably watching, because it is not realistic. You don't get DNA tests back in 12 hours. The people on that show are doing the work of 50 people. CSIs don't get to carry a gun and interview suspects, that kind of thing. But because the people at the show were very kind and liked me, whenever I had new books come out, they would say, send them to us and we'll see if we can get them on the show somewhere. They actually, at one point, apparently sent them to the writing room and see if they could work them in. It never happened, but I was really honored.
That's amazing.
And John and I have written a few books together. And those books were sent to CSI. So there was a chance that one of John's books they could have picked a different book to throw at the suspect's head. So then John would then be featured on a show that he doesn't find realistic, and is not a fan of because of that. But yet it's my favorite show because of that. So I think there was a little turn, and he had to sign a waiver to get the books on the set and all that. I had to do that too. So it's just a funny thing. So, but like I said, the people there in the props department, Sheila was very nice to me over the years, and I haven't heard from anyone since they've been back on the air, so I have no idea if my books are on the new show or not. One of my books was very hard to see, but it was Fairy with a Gun behind Lawrence Fishburne's head in his office on the show. When he was watching a screen, his bookcase was behind his head. And for those who don't know, at one point, his production company, Cinema Gypsy Productions, had optioned Fairy with a Gun. They wanted to make a TV show out of it. It didn't happen, but I get to brag about Morpheus wanted to make my my book into a TV show.
It didn't make a good TV show.
I think it would. And actually, in there, if the TV show was made, they would have had the rights to make a video game. I think it would have made a good video game too.
I just remember originally when I was introduced to Terabelle in the short story in Murphy's Law, it's like, to be honest, originally she was not one of my favorite characters. Now she is. Just because seeing more of her.
She's one of those characters that kind of took over. Like she was put in as a background character in Shadow of the Wolf, and she kept going to the front and not staying in the background. And by the end of that book, she was very different than she started out. And yeah, now she has 3 books of her own and has been in a bunch of things. And like I said, she had been, she's the only one of my books that, has been optioned by a major studio to do that. Although they did make a Soul for Hire short film, which is
an excellent short film.
Somewhere on Facebook, there is a link. It can be watched as a station on Roku where you can watch it. So it's a very nice short film. Everyone involved did a great job. And who knows, hopefully maybe there'll be more down the road.
I remember we had the folks on from that, and we were talking briefly about
I think you had the whole cast and crew and the producer, the director, the crew, and you even let me on. So that was nice.
Even you.
Even me. Well, I got to do a little cameo in it, which was nice. It was there were SAG rules, so I couldn't actually speak, but I still got to be on it. So because I not in the Screen Actors Guild. So.
And I know Amisha has talked from time to time about wanting to do one of your short stories as a short film as well.
Oh wow. Thanks. I had been contacted ages ago by someone who loved Fool's Day and wanted to do it as their project. They were going to a very prestigious film school in Chicago, which I cannot remember the name of. And they wanted to adopt Fool's Day for their senior film. And I was like, sure. And unfortunately, I guess film school is very expensive, and they ended up dropping out before they became a senior. So didn't happen. But I was all for it. And
that's actually a really ambitious choice.
Well, she had said because she knew some people who could do some CGI, and for Coyote and Sung Wukong, who are a coyote and a man-sized monkey, she said basically when they first appeared, they would appear briefly as that and then morph into human actors because otherwise she couldn't afford the budget. I'm like, oh yeah, that would be fine. That makes sense. They do that. There's a very nice, I think it's an Australian series called Monkey that you can watch on Netflix, that the first season was very good. The second season was okay. That they kind of do the same thing. He doesn't really transform by, he's just a human actor. So, they're both shapeshifters. So, yep. they kind of toned down the shape shifting aspect of his powers, so which lowers the budget.
Another thing Misha's talked about more than once with the idea of doing something. She wants to do something with Patty, and to do that, how do you do the size changes without finding a very short actor?
Well, I guess you'd have to. Well, they
There,
did it for The Hobbit, but I don't know if
yeah.
that technology is available for independent filmmakers.
Well, I know a lot of the ways they did it in Lord of the Rings in particular was more camera angles and the way, like, the famous example is there's Elijah Wood and Gandalf sitting in the cart. And you can't tell because of the camera angle, but the reason that Elijah Wood, who's actually taller than Ian McKellen, looks shorter is that he's sitting a couple of feet behind Ian McKellen.
That makes sense. So you're just playing with the perspective, and yep, holes in the floor,
Yep.
Kneeling down. I mean, you could just figure out for Tom Cruise. Apparently, they have to make him look taller in some things that he acts in. So just find out what they do for him and do the reverse.
One that occurs to me, because I know the one scene she's talked about before is doing one of the card games. And the easiest thing that would occur to me on how to do it is just chair heights.
But you could take a chair and just do that.
Yeah.
And just have everyone else's go up higher.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities. So, but yeah. And we'll see what happens down the road with all that. I am working on something this summer, which would be for a different medium. So we'll see what happens if that takes off. So knock on wood.
I would, but I don't. Not sure. Yeah, there's actual wood, so there I'll knock on some wood for you because I'm curious.
Once it gets a little bit further, I can say it's a script, but the person I'm working with, we have a chance to get it in front of somebody who may decide it would make a lovely addition to their garbage can, or may decide it would make a lovely addition to their project list. But we can get it in front of somebody. So who knows? Over the years, I've had a lot of different projects that things start and then they just don't work out. So, I don't hold my breath, but I do cross my fingers.
Yeah, and I've always been of the opinion the worst they can do is say no. You can always ask.
Right. And John and I had done a movie script a few years back, and the gentleman involved had agreed to pay us a certain amount, and they never paid us. So
That's unfortunate.
They never made the film, but they couldn't because they never paid us. But because they didn't pay us, even though they commissioned us and had us do 3 rewrites, they never followed through on what they owed us. And I probably should have gone with. I mean, we have the contract. Probably should have gone to Horror Writers Association or another group and said they owe us money, and but it, to me, at this point, if they made it and used it, that would be a whole nother story.
Yeah, maybe a situation of trying to get blood from a stone, or who knows.
Well, I mean, they still have done stuff, and they had made a film that won some awards. And I hate to say this, but the film they made was it was supposed to be a bad film, but they made a really good bad film. It was made that way on purpose. So they had done a really good job on the project they did. Unfortunately, like I said, they just didn't keep their word. So
that's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because I'd be curious to see the movie, and because you guys should get paid.
It was Mythos related. And the funny part was they had approached us because, we're as writers not above approaching people for different projects and to see what might come of something. Both John and I and several of the other writers we know, we've been fortunate that we've been asked to do a number of anthologies and been in magazines and with our short stories. I think I'm over 60 anthologies I've had stories in at this point.
Impressive.
And I think I'm over 50 magazines. So that's, not too shabby. But, with a lot of that, it's especially with the anthologies, you're invited in. So it's nice. Or you ask, you can do submissions, but then a lot of times once you submit and the editor likes you, you can, be asked for another project down the road. So, or someone's familiar with your work and they ask, could you do this? And CJ Henderson always said, when someone says, can you write this? Always say yes and figure out how to do it later.
I miss CJ. I would have loved to have him on the show. But you actually made me think. I'm not sure. I know writers have issues with this, but if you're interested, I had a very good idea, I thought, for a question for Dear Cthulhu.
People have sent me ones. Sadly, a lot of what I've been sent is not necessarily great, but I've done a few. Actually, one of the magazines that carried it is Dig This Real, which was a music magazine in the indie music and the indie scene. At one point, it was in Barnes and Noble and Borders in a plastic, clear plastic with a CD sampler and this glossy, full color magazine. Actually, for one issue, I was even put down as a contributing editor. It was a great magazine, and all the stuff. And Dear Cthulhu. Yep. And that magazine was sold in the U.S. and in Central America. And they got letters from Central America saying, "Is this real? Is this what life's really like in America?" And Edie, the editor, told me every time she'd write back and she'd say, "Yes, these letters are absolutely true."
I approve.
But I got more letters from that magazine than any other magazine that carried the column. So I actually used two of them. So, but my music magazine gave me the most Dear Cthulhu letters that were, period. So.
My suggestion, and use it if you think it's good enough. If not, I won't be offended, is a letter from a reformed Satanist who needs a suggestion on what to do with all the leftover goat's blood.
Before it spoils, of course.
Clearly. You're a devil worshiper. You have all these goats you've sacrificed. You keep the blood around for later sacrifices. Now what? I can't take full credit for it. Yeah.
Sell it to sell it to people who want to kill people to confuse the crime scene experts. Around the crime scene.
Like, why is there all this goat's blood here?
Where was the goat taken from? What's going on? I'm the person that springs to mind. So, because Cthulhu, wouldn't be that interested in goat's blood,
Exactly. It's like
if it was fermented, maybe as a nice, cordial, he might have a little taste. But yeah. Now, if it was kittens, that would be on. He loves his kittens. So
who doesn't love kittens?
Little hollandaise sauce.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he hasn't shown much
fondness for goats.
No. So
right, it just makes me think. Have you seen the TV series Lucifer?
I've seen much of the first season. It was well done.
And there's the comment in the one episode that, the one angel started the goat thing with Lucifer as a prank. Lucifer hates it.
Okay, well that would make sense. Well, with a lot of that, it's interesting to see where it all came from, because at one point, Negril, the Hell's detective, was an ancient Sumerian god, but then at one point when they were deifying deities from previous pantheons, he ended up becoming a lord of hell, a demon. So I was able to, take both of those things and make them both true. So a lot of what we would consider demonology is just somebody doing really bad fan fiction.
Yeah, kind of. That's completely fair.
So, but while I do a lot of reading and I have a lot of reference books, sometimes I'll read for fun. I'm not a demonologist or an expert, but there are a lot of things that are just somebody taking something and vilifying it.
And there's so many different versions of demonology, and even different Christian authors on the subject who don't agree with each other. So it's hard to go with a single. This is the canonical thing.
Oh
Although
yeah.
you're right, the whole issue of okay, this person worshipped them as a god, now they're a demon. And in defense of my own religion, Christianity is not the only religion that does this.
Well, I think, just politics in general works as religion. When you're coming in and taking over an area, you want to see what you can adopt from the old ways to make it more palatable, so that over a couple generations, it'll seem like their old stories work towards your favor. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, just like Saint Bridget and Saint Christopher, it's like they weren't historical figures.
in Murphy's, at one point, I have Hermes mention that some of the things St. Christopher is credited with, he did.
Hmm.
So whether or not it's true or not, that's another story. But yeah, because when you look at it, people who would see something for Pan or the satyrs would say, "Oh, it's Satan worship." Well, no, it's not, and it predates that. But I learned in a high school humanities class when we were learning about the French Revolution, and this is even more true today, is what people believe is true is
Is
more
more
important
important.
than what is true. Because just looking now, if you yell something loud enough on Twitter or, social media of your choice or the network of your choice, it becomes true. Well, it doesn't matter if it is true. And that goes for different, it's not just one side doing it, it's everyone does it.
Everybody does it.
I mean, that's why, famous people have PR people because, oh, wait, they caught him in bed with, 4 women, 2 men, a goat, and somebody, with tentacles for fingers. Well, he was at a costume party. And, you get in front of it, you make up a story, you push that story, and it doesn't matter if it's true, if your story is the one that is
Everybody remembers.
given to one that's believable. I mean, the thing that just came out, that one member of Congress said he kept getting invited to do drugs and go to orgies by others, and rather than concentrating on other things, the members of that party said we need to call him in and talk to him, and and it's bad enough you didn't show up, but you're telling people. But they'll do something on there and yell back and forth, but what's going on in Ukraine, if you were to look at a report in Russia versus a report in England versus a report in the US, you would get different views of what is happening. The Russians, they're stopping Nazis.
Yeah.
Other people like, no, they're killing innocent civilians. It's all about getting that. And
It's spin.
yeah. And I think that's why people like fiction, because you can get that spin, you can go into that world, and in that world, in that moment, what you're reading is true. But then when you come out of it, especially if it's something you don't like, or if it's a hard book, which can be a lot of fun to read, but you don't want to live in a horror novel. It's over, it's done with, as opposed to real life where you look at the TV screen and it's like, yeah. So
Granted, one could argue that I live in, given my hobbies, I live in a horror novel.
there is
But
that.
then again, the more often than not, it's a comedy, even with the paranormal.
But yeah. So thank you very much for having me on again. I do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I'm always happy to have you John on, both of you together. It's all good.
Yeah, maybe we can come on and do the show again together, and especially if we can, if I can finish the second Jack Gardner mystery, and we have the Detectives of the Abyss novel that'll be out, I think, some point in 2023. So, and I think that'll be a lot of fun because, again, we're combining Frankenstein, Dracula, some other classic monsters with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Jane Watson. who is the main protagonist of the piece. So, and in the Agents of the Abyss universe, always bothered me that if Count Dracula is so powerful, why is he still Count? And in this, he's King Dracula. There was a battle of Transylvania in World War I, and in this universe, Dracula got involved, beat both armies, and reclaimed Transylvania for himself and declared himself king.
Why not? He's Dracula. He could do that.
He's Dracula. Why not?
He's also easily my favorite of the Universal monsters. Always has been. Which is also, I'm excited, and I'll mention this again, particularly because listeners may be wondering that now next year I am actually going to Transylvania.
Which should be a wonderful trip.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this year. Russia got some terrible ideas, and things had to be postponed.
Probably good call.
Yeah.
And hopefully everything will be better.
Settle down by then. I think hopefully by June. I mean, Ukraine's doing pretty well for itself, all things considered. So I'm hoping that things will go back to something vaguely resembling sanity.
Well, I think, I know I like to see the stories of, the Ukrainians, like farmers stealing airplanes and tanks and anti-aircraft weapons with tractors. And, there's still a lot of bad things, but when they have these small victories, you see a farmer going by with a jet airplane on the back of his tractor. And that it's happening so much that they said you can keep it and we won't charge you taxes on it. So I mean there's horrible things going on, but
there's some awesome things like that going on too.
Yeah. So and that they're offering, they were offering, I'm assuming they may still be, I think the equivalent of $45,000 for every soldier that defects. So they're actually just saying, we'll give you more than a year's salary. Come on over,
I'm wondering if people are taking up on them. I would think they would.
You would think, especially if you're. What do you mean this isn't a training exercise? You want me to kill women and children? You'll give me $45,000 not to kill women and children? Bye. It's
like, go Ukraine! I'm on your side now. It just makes me think the great story about World War II and espionage, where basically all of the agents that Germany sent to England flipped almost immediately. In no small part because Germany had the brilliant idea of using conscripts from countries that they had defeated as spies.
Well,
and yet they have really no loyalty.
Bad judgment call.
Yeah. It's like, so the spy would show up in England, go over to MI6, go, "Hi, I'm a Nazi agent. Can I turn double agent for you?"
Well, yeah. I have a feeling that there's probably, a few of that going on there, just.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. So, but hopefully calmer heads and sanity and human decency will help. But I think sanctions will probably do more.
Yeah.
So
I just, prayers with the Ukrainian people, obviously. Folks, if you have the money, donate to the relief efforts that are going on. And I'd say if I thought that Putin would ever watch this, I'd beg him to stop the freaking battle, but he ain't going to watch this.
However, if you'd like to ban one of my books, no.
Well, that's always a funny thing.
Just meet me in Washington, D.C., okay? We'll let everyone know you're coming.
Yeah. See, I had the whole idea a while back. Unfortunately, it's too against several of my beliefs ethically to do it, of starting an advertising agency that linked writers with evangelical preachers that are particularly of the bent that ban and burn books as free advertising or some sort of deal there. And it's like, this could work because if you want to get people to read a book, one of the best ways is tell them not to.
Yeah, no, I'm I would be perfectly okay with it. I think it would only help sales. So
Plus, fundamentalist preachers are generally not in favor of theft. So even if they're going to burn your book, they're going to buy it first, or somebody's going to buy it. You
I
get the
think we should
royalties
buy
either
several
way.
thousand copies and make a really big bonfire. We want them to be able to see it from space. Okay.
There you go.
I don't
Again,
think I don't think 10,000 copies would be too few.
no, if you want it to be seen, if you want it big enough, you really want God to see it from up on high, you need at least
Exactly.
10,000 copies.
Right. Easy. So.
But we should probably get going, particularly because it's going to cut out the live stream any minute now, and
All right.
2 hours is a pretty good length for an interview, I think.
I think so too. So thank you again for having me on. I
Patrick,
appreciate
it's
it.
always a pleasure. I'm happy to have
Thanks
you.
everybody for tuning in and for your questions, and be well.
Okay, folks, we will be back again soon, hopefully next week. I don't want to make promises just because things come up. I'm going to be on Lisa for Truth's channel tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. Eastern, which is my time zone. So please go check that out. Check out Lisa in general. She's got a really good channel. She's a great YouTuber.